I'm beautiful, lovely gamers. My name is Jonal. Today we are gonna talk about 222 dive comp. Dive comp has been now that 222 is out for a while. I think that's a better introduction to this. There's a lot of teams that want to run dive. There's a lot of people that have been running dive. There's a lot of people that forgot how to play dive. So I decided to go into an in-depth look of how dive comp works on a more advanced level. So I'm going to try to break this down in a nice orderly fashion. If there's anything that I'm skipping to shorten the video to just simplify stuff, of course you can ask questions down in the comment section on our Discord server, which all of those are linked down in the description down below, my Twitter, my Twitch as well. And before we start the video, as always, if you want to hire me as a private coach, get better at the game, rank up and so on, doesn't matter if you're bronze stuff or 100, if you play for a team or not, hit me up on our Discord server. It's 50 euros for a 2-hour session, and I hope I see you there. Now, let's talk dive. So what is dive comp? Dive comp is a, what can I say, compared to certain team composition that has far more static ways of playing, dive is very dynamic in the way that it's played. It's played for mostly for the fact that you can use it to ignore tank lines. Because one of the weaknesses of dive comp is that you get the weakest main group in the game right now, tank wise. If you're gonna run right death bolt, bunker, or dive, you get the weakest tank line when it comes to the weakest front line. You can't brawl as hard as a bunker, which has abilities that can quickly outstay, like fortify and breather and so on. It's very difficult to kill stuff in a bunker. And Reinhardt can outdamage, for example, both the Winston and the D.Va, and the Zarya can also outdamage both of these tanks. So you will quickly see that on a fair matchup, if you go front line to front line, the dive comp will not be able. That's why it's far more of a dynamic setup. Now, it can be played with a lot of different variations of DPS and support. What we normally look like is that there is two, and we're gonna run the Winston D.Va dive, which is the normal version of dive. You will see something like Winston D.Va, just due to the fact that it's very high mobility and can therefore ignore the front line of the opposing team. So dive is used in a setup, and if we look at how you take space, right, you have three kind of rules to remember, right? You can take space. So you take space, that's when you, for example, if you leap up here, you take this space, you physically go there. Then you claim the space, meaning if there was someone up here, like an enemy McCree, you would kill him. Now you claim the space. If there's no one there, you just immediately claim it, and then you hold the space. And dive is really bad at holding space. It's really good at taking space. It can normally get to everywhere immediately, so it's very good at that, right? Like it's a 10 out of 10 there. Claiming the space, it is decent. It's decent as long as the enemy team composition is not something that can hold, out brawl, or out sustain the dive comp. So it's decent at that. Let's just put a 5, and it's really bad at holding space. That is kind of the big weakness of dive comp. And therefore, you have known dive, and that's why the very stereotypical way of people describing dive is, oh, you just leap stuff, right? That's the the usual one. You just leap stuff. So let's take a look at this. This is a tracer double flank or a tracer against dive, and let's just look at this. Look at the general formation. This is as they have just like kind of left spawn and then their rotation. Essentially, the Winston has leapt up here. The D.Va also leapt up here. The gun just wall climbed. The Tracer has taken point, and they are right now working with the Zenyatta to rotate him, hopefully to jump pad if it's a possibility. We have therefore also expended majority of our resources, meaning right now a dive is not possible. To dive, you need all the resources, and because of the double flanker, you will need not just all your tank resources, you will also need majority of a setup. So the setup here is built between the two various scenarios that we are expecting to face, and that's either a fight somewhere here, right, on the low ground, that they will try to contest our high ground, right? It can also be that they are generally just trying to claim high ground with us if they're playing counter dive. That's another scenario that we can fight for. Then there would be a claiming scenario where both teams would fight for control of the high ground. Now, if we're not met by anything, like it's a death blow or whatever, the fighting would normally happen somewhere here. And if not, then the fighting would normally happen somewhere main, for them to just immediately try to take point control for us. That is what this setup is done for. As you can see, the Tracer's positioning is very important, because how you should look at dive is you should always look at the individual roles of a team. That's a general way of looking at certain teams. So here, the Winston, right, the main tank, his job is to control space and to initiate a dive to keep pressure on the enemy team so the DPS can do their work. Normally, he will never be dealing with tanks, as tanks can very hard counter a Winston. He doesn't work against if you just list any tank in your head right now, normally they can 1v1 the Winston quite easily. He's not very good against tank normally because there's armor and large health pools and so on. He works against huge amount of enemies, especially enemies that stack and especially squishies that he can kill very easily. If you get in range of a Winston and you don't get peeled, you normally die immediately. The D.Va, which is the off tank and the other standard factor, right? Normally there's always a Winston, a D.Va, and Winston, D.Va die, right? She is there for a lot of things, for peeling and for helping the Winston and so on, of course help. But her main job is to control the enemy tank line, because she's very good at controlling enemy tank line, taking away pressure and keeping pressure on the tank so they can't just run into the Winston, start dueling him, can't just run down, you know, their DPSs or dive the support line as we dive them, and also to help peel and absorb some of the blows. For example, EDing holds, or if somebody gets hooked, pop a matrix around that. Just if they play bunker, to just matrix the D.Va, the Orisa and the Hog, and just put the matrix around both of those tanks and practically nullifying a huge chunk of their damage, will do that our dive team, meaning, you know, in this scenario, our Winston, our Genji, and our Tracer, can actually do something. After that, the DPSs are, no matter what they are, you can follow a very basic rule for the DPS, and that is that the DPSs has to be able to respond to the dive. Meaning, the Winston has the most mobility in the game. He can get shit, he can get areas where no one else can get. For example, the Winston can from here leap to here without a problem. But the only one that can follow here is the Tracer, which has to run through main. No one else can follow. Meaning, at this scenario, the Genji and the D.Va and also the supports cannot help this dive so it's a bad dive, so you need to set up. Let's say that the enemy team is playing something, it doesn't really matter what. Let's just say Reinhardt and make him red. It doesn't really matter, it's just a template for the enemy team. So let's say the enemy team rotated to here. We went up here, they rotated through main, we had burned all the resources, we had burned leap, booster and all that, so our resources were low, so we couldn't attack here. Their rotation, while that, you know, gave a vulnerability, as their backline would normally be exposed, and their front line would be very easy for us to avoid, especially with this. And even though our setup would be really great from here, since we can normally engage with the majority of the team, because of the fact that we didn't have resources, we could not die. So they got their rotation and they rotated to here, trying to, you know, dodge some LOS and so on. How would we respond to that? You would do a setup, meaning your Winston would either go here or go high ground, your Genji would go high ground, your D would go high ground, your Tracer would fall out on the flank, and you would normally get your Zenyatta into main if it was possible. If they were holding this far back, it's fully possible. If they were claiming more of this, then you would rotate your Zenyatta through main here, right? Somehow you would get your Zenyatta either through here or through main, and then over here. Most likely just through here to keep him safer. So you would keep your Zenyatta onto the point, and then you would send the Lucio up with these two if possible, right? He would be ready to kind of bounce around, but you would normally put him up here if it was a possibility, so that, for example, you can speed boost your Zenyatta up here and then keep him here, then the Zenyatta can drop if he needs to, so that he can help these two engage since they have the shortest range. At this point, the Tracer will either flank far or flank whatever, as long as he ends up in backline of the enemy team, which is symbolized by this. This is the backline, this is the front line. It's not one hero, it's not just two heroes versus six, it's just placeholders, right? In this scenario, the dive is quite simple. We know how they're gonna push, right? They're gonna send majority of their front line out to the point, meaning it's quite easy for us to avoid whatever they have off front line. Let's see here if I can be smart and I can their capture point. Right? They need to put the front line on the point to start capturing, else we would just free cap it, right? They know that they need to play, you know, at least here to keep LOS for the tanks to help, and this is a very vulnerable position, so they most likely will have some people far forward to try to cover, you know, angles like this. This far back, they will only be able to shoot directly forward, which is very easy to dodge, right? So you would normally have a front line, and then we just drop a McCree as a representation of, like, DPSs that play, right? You can see how this is quite easy for the dive. As this dive is set up now, we can quite easily start a dive by leaping. The Zenyatta goes main to keep pressure, so the Rhine, or whoever it is, let's say it's Orisa, can't drop a shield. So the tanks actually cannot drop their shield without getting shot by the Zen. The Zen would therefore take an angle where he's safe, but can keep pressure on the front line. The Monkey would dive past the front line of the enemy team to take out and split majority of the back line. Now there's two ways you can do it. You can either split the front line from the back line and then single out the front line, which does not work in bunker because of Fortify. Or you could split out the backline from the front line, since normally the front line is the most survivable. But it depends. In Death Ball, you can a lot of time kill the Ryan Zarya because the Ryan Zarya doesn't have anything to peel himself with. In Bunker, that doesn't work, unless you have baited out the Fortify of the Orisa, depending on the positioning. So let's just say that you will leap here and you will essentially force the DPSs to fall back. the amp speed at the same time would come in. The diva would go here and start pressuring the tank line, making sure that Ryan can't just rush after, because he's getting headshot. The same with the start. They cannot just rush after, although Ryan or Rissa, they cannot just rush after the Winston because they're getting shot. They need to deal with the diva first, someone that has a lot of health and is visible from the Zenyatta normally, and at the same time also can eat and block a lot of damage from, for example, like Round Syra is really good at taking out divas. But for example, Orisa Hog is really bad at that. You can hook her, but she can still matrix you for a very long time and keep the tank line occupied. The Genji would also be speeded in, hopefully in a way so that he did not have to burn dash on the engage. So he could just run in, jump over, and get to the back line, either with or without his dash. So the Winston, the Tracer would of course at the same time collapse on the back line. And at this point, this would be a one dive. You have the back line isolated, you have the front line isolated. The Lucio will either help push the front line away and kind of keep them out of the fight and then help taking out these guys, either distracting the front line or helping onto the dive on the back line. Sometimes the diva will help on nuking the back line. For example, if the Zenyatta was this far forward on the dive, she would just help just burn him fast and then deal with tank control, just because it would be faster and easier, right? You kill whatever is easy as a diva. It's not that you're only on tank duty, but the main job of the diva is tank duty, to make sure the tanks are occupied and cannot do anything. That way, diva keeps both the front line, the two tanks away. One diva keeps two tanks away, and the rest of the back line is getting dived by, you know, and the Zenyatta also keep pressures on the two tanks on the front line, discording or whatnot, especially the main tank. And at the same time, the Lucio can harass the front line as well, and there's a big dive team with the Winston, which is kind of the key figure, because you would think, oh, but there's two supports and two tanks. There's four in the back line, but only two of our DPSs. But the Winston is the given factor. Chain damage with a shield, a lot of health, right? And then incredibly quick burst DPS. If this was snipers, you would fight on LOS. You would normally not do a hard engage on the dive. You would fight LOS, meaning you would try to make sure that they could never push. For example, if they did this rotation with snipers, you would normally deny the front line any form of ability to push and contest a point, so you would never let the DPSs out to do any work, and they would be locked down by a Hanzo and a Widowmaker from two different angles that would shoot on that location. That is the very, very submental, that's a very basic version of a dive. Let's take a look here at Watchful Gibraltar, which is known as a very dive. On defense, it's very similar. So this is our defensive setup. So right now, we play Widow Genji, as an example, just to mix up the team composition. We have a Mercy that can damage Priest and Res, that kind of fly around and do her thing. We have a Zenyatta for trance and damage. Disco Dogs also pockets on him. A lot of time you would play this as an Ana, and give Ana the only, which can be countered by a damage boost to Genji on the opposing side. They also play dive, but a lot of time you would play this with an Ana, just because of the range, right? But this is the whole idea. The whole idea is that you have a very mobile tank line that can area denial, because remember that that's what Winston is. Dive is very heavy on area denial. You might have known this as, you know, you might have heard before people say, oh, the dive is choking out the enemy team. Meaning the dive is denying so much space, saying, okay, I'm gonna be playing, you know, for example here, we're denying majority of it. We are denying the choke. They cannot push the choke. There will be a Winston Tesla cannon in the corner who can leap onto high ground and continue to Tesla cannon while getting pocketed. There's a diva that can do the same, either take high, well, these two can split and create crossfire. There's also a Genji here. They cannot push main, they cannot push top, they cannot push blue box. If they push blue box, again, we can go up with our tanks and our DPS and just drop down and then go up again and go down and go up again and go down. And it's very difficult for the opposing team to do much about it, buying us a lot of time for our Widow to set up a lot of LOS. Our Mercy can pocket these guys. Our Zenyatta can set further up, further back, and Discord and damage these guys. And essentially, if the front line tries to move, your back line dies. And we are here reliant on the fact that our Winston, our Genji, will, and the LOS, so the zoning of the Widowmaker, will stop there if they are playing dive as well. We'll make sure that, okay, the Genji can never get close to the Sen, for example. Their Genji can never get close to our Zenyatta or a Widow, and they can't kill her because she can fly, and she can't just rush our Genji because if they try, we have a Winston, right? So the DPSs of the opposing team will never be allowed to set up. That is the whole idea of this. That we will, again, similar on Oasis, where we are setting up our dive comp offensively to dive and take out the squishies, here we're doing the same. If we face the enemy team's front line, and let's say that's another Winston, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna dive here, then we will put our diva on him. And we will say, okay, our diva is on your Winston, so he can't push. They will put their diva on our diva, and we will, okay, let's farm your diva. And at the same time, because a Winston is denying the entire front line with the D.Va, and there's also Genji here, their Genji can never push up. Their Genji has to play far back, because if he plays too far up, he will get locked on by the Tesla cannon, he has to dash, and he will get left and killed, and there will be a lot of healing, right? It's very difficult for the opposing team to move on us, and offense on us. If they're playing something slow, let's say they're playing bunker, you would normally play, okay, you're playing bunker. If your Orisa plays too far forward, let's say she tries to push aggressively out, this is, of course, something that bunker can do, and you can brute force very hard with bunker, which is the problem for dive. But the whole idea is, again, that let's say the Orisa pushes out to here, we can now put our, our dive team to immediately strike the back line, while our D.Va can shoot down on your Orisa and pressure your Orisa. You cannot move your shield to block the D.Va, and because then the Widow and the Zenyatta will kill you, right? We have a dive team that can immediately just block off your entire back line, and then we can either, push you with our two DPSs, and now our DPS and our D.Va, or we can just, actually just dive your back line. So pushing too far out will be impossible. Of course, you can then play with Hog, and then you can say, okay, but then you just need one good halt, and halt the Winston off, hook him and kill him. That's, of course, an opportunity that they can try to play. At the same time, remember that our Widowmaker would be zoning this entire area, right? So the defensive side of dive comp, and this is the same concepts. You're denying, you're setting up the dive. Where would the enemy team be? They will be here, they will be here, they will be trying to take blue. Okay, let's set up a defensive setup. Where's the front line gonna be? The front line's gonna be here. Okay, can we ignore the front line? Yes, D.Va, that's your job. Okay, I can already be playing this high ground, so I can already deny them. Great, where's the backline gonna be? Like behind here somewhere. Okay, can we then get that backline? Yes, we can set up a 3-man dive team, or a 2-man dive team, to hit that, and then we can have zoning in main with her, and we can have zoning in main with the Zenyatta. The roles are still the same in dive comp, even though it's a different scenario. Let's take a look at the last one, which is Blizzard World, which probably some of you guys have seen, because if you remember way back in London Spitfire played dive and did this very nicely, and I think I actually covered it on my channel a long time ago. So here is actually a scenario. So the enemy team is playing this. They're playing bunker with double sniper. They're playing with a D.Va because they decide that, okay, we want the more, we don't want to be rushed. We want the mobility. We want the verticality instead of the hook, instead of the zone that you get from Hog with his hooks. And that's fine. So that's what they want. Let's put in the not spawn points. Let's put in the capture points, right? And let's just move the payload because it's irritating. Okay, so this is the same series. Now here, of course, the dive comp starts facing a little bit of a problem. It's very difficult for us to actually dive this, right? Diving, did I remove my drawing tool? I'm so good. Okay, diving through main, right, we will take a lot of damage. The Zenyatta, the Hanzo, right, and the Monkey will be burned from his health before he can ever do anything, right? Go around here, and you can dodge some of the LOS, but you will still get zoned very hard, and it can still be very difficult. So what you can do, you can, of course, try to flank around like this. You don't need to move with all of them, but you can, for example, flank around like this. That's, of course, an opportunity, or at least a possibility. But for simplicity's sake, let's just say that you want to dive through main. Okay, let's just say that. This is the very same thing. You want to dive through main? Okay, great. Let's split in the dive team. Let's put them over here, for example. Okay, there's a little bit of LOS here. The bunker is faced like that. So, okay, let's just play around with that. We have a tracer that's set up here in the staircase. He's going to hit the back line, and then the dive should happen as normal. The engage should happen with some matrix around the monkey to try to allow him to dive. He will most likely land here and shift the entire balance over there. At the same time, we would have a D.Va that, for example, flies up here. A Genji speed, our Zenyatta is playing, for example, either here or here, depending, right? And the Lucio speeds up, and the Genji gets to take, some space here, and we get to push in. And here's where a lot of time this happened with dive. So this would, for example, happen. Let's say this would happen. We couldn't make it all the way to the Zenyatta because it's too deep and so on. So we're doing a soft dive. So we did the first engage. We disengage. We claim point. We play point. We now have some resources that we can build. The enemy team probably burned Fortify. They pushed they used their grapple. They used rapid fire, right? They used some of their matrix, and probably the rockets. And now we are building quickly up our resources again, and to do a secondary dive. For example, we can land, we can retreat, we can get speed boosted a little bit around here, right? The enemy team has shifted. We get healed, and then we do another dive. That's one of our options here. One of the other ones is how you're setting up on, for example, Hollywood, and the fact that you don't always need to dive with full flanker teams. So, for example, let's say Hollywood here, you have a tracer that is just because I really like Tracer Genji dive comps, and I think it's a really easy way. So let's say that you're putting your Tracer through alley, your entire dive team, let's say roofs. I still think it's stupid that it adds this to it, but whatever. You put whatever, you're defending, so you're putting your dive team on the high ground, right? You're putting your Genji here, you're putting your Lucio there, and you're putting your Zenyatta in main, right? Again, why are we putting him in main? So that he can keep pressure on the enemy shield. Let's say that the enemy team wants, they know that we are up here, but they want to rotate. So let's say that they are playing whatever. They have their frontliner. He's pushing up here. He puts his shield, right? He's pushing the payload, whatnot. He's putting the shield to block the Zen, right? And they are therefore, you know, doing. You can see how this is very easy for us to play around, right? We don't need to dive the front line. So let's say that there's Zenyatta. If he stays in, well, he can't stay here because then he's just gonna get smacked on. He can't stay back here. So let's say that he tried to put himself back here, right? Thinking that, okay, the amp speed cannot get these 3 players in range of us. There's no way. And they don't have snipers, so this is the safest way. So at this point, you would normally dive, for example, with these 2. So the monkey would do the heavy lifting of actually attacking and diving the enemy team comes in. Let's say there was a Hanzo here as well, just to make this a little bit more juicy for them. Hanzo is nowhere to be found today. Am I blind? Where the fuck is Hanzo? Hanzo. There he is. Right. So, whatever. They have 2 players here. 1 player here. It doesn't matter. The Winston will go for there. The D will go here. Right. On the high ground. Try to keep pressure on that. And the Lucio and the Genji, for example, can speed either on another target. Let's say that if there was... Let's say they were playing double sniper then. Right. Let's say the Widowmaker was top, for example. Then they can... Okay, these 2 can, for example, engage top. Or... Again, yeah, these 2, for example, can engage top, make the Widow disengage or kill her. If the disengages, then, okay, then she's out of the fight and we can rush down through main and help with the dive. Or let's say that she is, for example, if she is in main, then we can help in main. Or if there's fuck the Widowmaker, we can also put these 2 to try to just, you know, help the D.Va keep pressure on these guys, because we know that these 2 dive players will immediately just remove 2 of them. Right? So we don't actually need to put everyone in the dive, even with a heavy dive, because it's about, can we get this kill, right? They're saying that we don't need the Widowmaker and the Hanzo to have LOS on the Zenyatta to dive the enemy squishy line, to dive the squishies. If we can have one of them to do follow-up and the other one to keep pressure on tanks, or one of them to do follow-up, and then we know that, okay, that's all we needed, now we have claimed this space, now we can continue fighting, and now the Hanzo would be viable in that fight. That's when we do it, right? So dive is about dynamic high ground control. You play a lot for high ground control, for setting up into chokes. The less resources you can burn during a dive, the better. So if you could drop on someone instead of leaping on someone, like, for example, if they're trying to push through main and you have a Winston here and he can just drop and then pressure, then he can disengage. And that's, you know, the best type of dive. Because then you will still have leap, so you could have dropped in main and then leap there, or you could leap to disengage to a high ground, or you could leap back up here, right? You could use this to move around. So if you don't have to use the leap during that, that's of course the best way of doing so. And we saw that, for example, at Gibraltar. On Gibraltar, you don't always want to start on, you want to start on the high ground, for example, and then you can just rather drop on the low ground. And if they're going to play high ground, well, then you can challenge them high ground without burning leap, and you will still have leap. So you can drop, get healed up, leap back up. For example, here, if a bunker pushes through, and you have your monkey up here, the bunker will push through, you'll drop, you'll force out Fortify and a bunch of abilities. If they're playing Mei Reaper, let's say you drop, you also get some pressure onto the Mei. Mei pops Ice, Roadhog pops, now Orisa immediately pops Fortify because she's bad, and the Roadhog pops Breeder because he's focused by the D.Va. That's 3 abilities out. Disengage. Then the entire team just disengages. They didn't burn any resources, we get out. We wait for our abilities to get back up, for our health to get back up, and then we engage again. And now the Orisa is vulnerable, now the Roadhog is vulnerable, the Mei is also vulnerable. All of those are vulnerable because they burned all the abilities. They burned all the safeguards, right? Because, again, our main group is super weak. So we wouldn't fight someone that we can't take out. That's why in dive comps, you would normally, you used to see a lot that Zenyatta was cycled out. Because in dive versus dive, you cannot dive anyone but the Zen, right? You cannot dive the Tracer, you cannot dive the Genji, you cannot dive the Winston, you cannot dive the D.Va. Diving the Lucio is difficult because of his boops and wall, right? The only viable dive target back in the days when everyone was running, you know, double flanker dive was the enemy Zenyatta. He was the only one that was a viable target. And then you would dive him, and then after that, it would be a brawl about positioning and pressure on tank zone, which is far more advanced dive on dive, which I can cover. I hope that this helps a little bit and helps kind of clarify. I know it's a little bit messy. I'm trying to kind of make this structured without being too long, but going enough in depth. So I would like feedback on these kinds of series. And give your tips if you have any tips and advice on how to master dive comp. A lot of teams are struggling with them. And I would like to, well, yeah, see what you guys have to think about this team composition. Besides that, I hope you guys have a lovely, lovely gaming experience. As always, my name is Jonal. You guys keep the enemy in your closet.